Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to be taking you through some quick tips for the Leaving Cert maths exams, and this is relevant to both higher level and ordinary level students. My name is Áine Devlin and I am the maths contributor to ExamRevision.ie. Starting off then, if we talk about the layout of the exam, and again this is relevant to both higher level and ordinary level Leaving Cert math students. So we know that we're going to be dealing with two different papers. We've got paper 1 and paper 2, and they are both split up into section A and section B. So if you have looked at any exam papers, which I'm sure you all have, you should take note of that each paper, both paper 1 and paper 2, has a section A and a section B in it. Section A is our concepts and skills type questions. So they would be considered, I suppose, slightly more straightforward insofar as that they normally deal with one kind of topic from the Leaving Cert, maybe two. But generally they'd be considered the slightly easier questions. And then section B is our context and applications questions. Those ones you're probably familiar with. They can be a little bit trickier at times because they deal with a wider scope of questions. So when you're looking through them, you may realize that there's 3 or 4 different topics from the Leaving Cert course within the one section B question. So that's something just to be aware of. And I would definitely recommend that when you're studying and you're using your exam papers, make sure you're doing a mixture of section A and section B questions. Because as I said, the section A questions would be considered slightly more straightforward. So it's important that you have seen and tried lots of section B questions as well, so you kind of know what to expect. Now, this year on the Leaving Cert, you are not expected to do all of the paper 1 and the paper 2 questions. Up until this year, we would have said to students, go in and spend your 2.5 hours and get the entire paper done. This is not the case for you guys. So this year, section A is going to be worth 55% of your marks, and section B is going to be 45%. And I'm going to talk you through now the breakdown of how many questions you need to do in each of those sections on both paper 1 and paper 2. So looking at the 2021 adjustments then, I'm sure you've seen this before, but just to kind of break it down for you really quickly then, in section A, there are going to still be 6 questions, but they're going to be worth 30 marks each, meaning that you're going to have to do 4 out of the 6 questions to make up your 120 marks. So really importantly, when you go into your exam, whether it's paper 1 or paper 2, you don't launch in and just do the 6 section A questions, because you're probably not going to have time to do them all. So really importantly, 4 out of 6 is your aim. Of course, and we'll talk about timings in a second, if you have time to go back and do another 1 or 2, brilliant. But your aim is to pick your best 4 questions out of the 6. And again, that's for both paper 1 and paper 2. Then you're going to look at your section Bs, and these are going to be worth 50 marks each. There's going to be 4 of them, and you have to answer 2. So again, in your section B, your aim is to answer 2 out of the 4. So this year more than ever, it's going to be really important to give yourself a few minutes at the start of your exam for both paper 1 and paper 2 to get to grips with the different questions that are there, and to make logical decisions about which ones you're going to start with. Please don't go into your exam feeling like you have to complete everything, because I do think you will run out of time and you may miss a question that you're more comfortable with. You're going to have 2.5 hours on each of your papers, so both paper 1 and paper 2, to work through your 4 questions in section A and your 2 questions in section B. And then we'll look in a second at some advice about maybe timings and how you might have time to complete 1 or 2 extra questions. So these are some exam tips that I've put together for both our higher level and our ordinary level students. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, and I'm sure you've heard most of these before in different places, but just a few things to keep in mind over the next few days when you're preparing for your maths exams. So revise the basics. Please do make sure that if you're struggling with anything to do with algebra, let's say coordinate geometry, like basic things that you should know from your junior cert, some of your angle facts, go back and just really quickly go back over them, because you're going to feel more confident going in and trying the harder questions if you're sure that you've got the basics figured out. And on examrevision.ie we've loads of videos that go through the entire junior cert course and leaving cert course, and I've embedded some of those more basic junior cert concepts into our leaving cert videos as well, just to make sure that you feel confident with them. Second thing is to make sure you're reading your questions carefully. So as you're practicing questions over the next couple of days, look at what the question is asking you to do. Does it say factorize? Does it say solve? Does it say evaluate? Have a look through and get to grips with the type of language that the questions are asking you. And then when you're looking at the mark schemes, you can be confident that if you see that word in your exam next week, that you will know, okay, that's what I'm being asked to do. Next thing is to remember the importance of attempt marks. And I'm sure all of your maths teachers from first year have been talking to you about attempt marks, but I can't explain how important they are in the Leaving Cert course. I'm sure, again, from looking at marking schemes yourselves, you're probably aware of this, but sometimes something as basic as writing down a formula and subbing into it in some way. Okay, so that is important as well. Do sub into your formulae. Don't just write down the formula and think, oh yeah, I've got my attempt marks. Now, a lot of the times in the mark schemes, it will say some correct substitution into a formula. So for example, let's say it's an equation of a line formula and you only know the point, you don't have the slope. Sub that in and just leave the slope as m. And again, that should really help you with attempt marks. In something like a statistics question, by simply just writing down the mean or the standard deviation with mu or sigma, again, you're getting low attempt marks for that, or low partial credits for that. So do definitely keep that in mind when you're going through your exam. Don't assume that later questions have most marks. So again, we don't know the mark scheme when you guys are in there. You guys won't know the mark scheme when you're in there. It all changes after you have completed the exam. So just because a question at the end is, more difficult, that does not necessarily mean that it's going to be worth more marks. So just give every question your absolute all, and sometimes the very first question on the page could be worth the most amount of marks. So again, to go through your paper breakdown in a bit more detail, as we've said already, we know we've got 220 marks per paper, and you're going to have 2.5 hours to complete both paper 1 and paper 2. So my general advice then would be on section A to spend about 15 to 20 minutes per question. And again, that's going to be for your 4 questions. And then about 20 to 25 minutes on section B. Now, if you can get them down to about 20 minutes, even better, because that will give you a bit more time. Because this year there's choice, I think it's more important than ever to make sure that you are really tracking your time. As I said, and obviously it was important every other year because you didn't want to run out of time either, but because I think there's choice, it's going to lead you to nearly think, oh yeah, if I can get a few more section A's done now while I'm at it, happy days. But don't. Do your 4 questions, track your time, see how much time you've spent on it. Let's say you've done your section A's, your 4 questions, and you're at about the hour mark. You're on track. You go and do your 2 question B's. Hopefully you spend about 40 minutes on that, and then you'll be able to work out how much time you can spend. Again, try and track, as I've said already, and move on and mark to return to questions, because while I'm suggesting here to try and maybe get an extra question in each section, so if you keep to these timings, you should have time, roughly speaking, to spend to complete 1 more section A and 1 more section B question, and that should allow you to have a few minutes to read through the paper at the start as well. But just make sure that if you do end up spending a lot of time on 1 or 2 of your questions, that you're not then jumping in to try and complete another question when you maybe should be using those 10 or 15 minutes to go back and finish off a few of the questions that you marked to return to. So just taking all that on board, go in with quite an open mind, saying I'm going to aim for 15 to 20 minutes on section A, 20 to 25 minutes on section B, and then you should be able to decide from there whether you have time to complete more questions. Remember, they're only going to mark your best ones, so don't feel under pressure to complete more unless you have the time. If you use a calculator, still show your calculations on the paper. which I know seems very straightforward, but it is important just to remember. Don't forget your formula booklet. Now, obviously, you're going to be given a formula tables. I don't mean don't forget the physical one on the day. What I mean by that is if you're particularly in paper 2, when you're in there and you're stuck in the middle of a question and you're getting a little bit bogged down, go back to basics. Think, what formulae do I know? What formulae do I have in front of me? And just double check that there's nothing in there that you won't be able to use. And even in paper 1, remember your differentiation and your integration for higher level students. Like, there's loads of help in those formula tables for you as well. I'm always going on to my students about drawing sketches to help to visualize a question, particularly on some of the kind of shape and circle and line questions. Watch out for the minus signs. That's definitely something that's very important just to be aware of. In a simple algebra, multiplying out double brackets question, your minus can throw you off, or in an algebraic fractions question, the minus can really throw people off as well. So just do keep an eye on those. Do a common sense check with your answers at the end. Just again, think logically, does it make sense? And again, it will depend on the question whether you'll be able to do that. And finally, ensure that you have implemented the correct degree of accuracy and included your units. So always go back at the end of a question and double check what have I been asked to round it to, what significant figures does it have to be, and what unit should it be. And that will definitely give you a good method for finishing off each of your questions before you move on to the next one. Looking at the breakdown then of topics to expect on paper 1 and paper 2. Again, this is certainly not an exhaustive list. You will see when I go through the breakdown of what's come up in the past that there is a little bit of crossover. So this is me giving you an idea of the topics, but it is not saying that they will not cross over. And I've written it up the top. Here it says it is possible that some elements of the course may come up in either paper. So for example, area and volume, Pythagoras' theorem, features quite regularly on paper 1, so much so that I'd almost go on and add my area and volume into the paper 1 topics, because it does come up quite a lot, particularly in the section B's. But again, that's just to give you a rough idea. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you can certainly pause the video and have a look through them so that you know, roughly speaking, what to expect on paper 1 and paper 2. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this video is I'm going to go through some of the things that have come up on paper 1 and paper 2 for higher level, and also the ordinary level topics. So you can skip through the next little bit if you're an ordinary level student, and equally if you're a higher level student, just watch the next 2 slides and then you can finish up the video. So this is some of the breakdown of the paper 1 topics that we've seen in higher level over the last 6 years. So again, this is just to give you a rough idea when you're doing your study. I'm not going to really make an attempt to predict lots about the exam, as much as I would love to be able to do that. The maths course is quite broad, and really everything kind of comes up in some shape or form nearly every year. And again, I have picked out the main topics from each question here. I have missed little bits and bobs, and I haven't included absolutely everything. So again, this is definitely not an exhaustive list either, but it's just to give you, I suppose, an idea when you're studying, to show you how worthwhile it is to cover certain topics. Some of you may have left out certain topics yourselves or along with your class and your teachers, and obviously that will dictate certain areas. But if you've covered, let's say, the whole course, and now you're trying to decide, will there be particular topics I want to focus on, this may help you. So I suppose, looking really quickly, algebra functions is always a really important one on paper 1. And you can see in red here, last year it came up 3 times. The year before, you're looking at 5 or 6 times. The year before that, 4 times. So you can see it's coming up across the board a number of times on both the section A and the section B questions. So it's essential. You have to have your algebra and your functions covered, in my opinion, for your paper 1. We can see complex numbers here in purple has come up in 1 question every single year. So again, quite a good one going into your exam, knowing it has come up in some shape or form. That being said, it has come up with other topics as well, so it's not necessarily going to be standalone, but again, it has come up every year. We can see differentiation and integration I have here in light blue, and again you can see it features heavily in section A's, but also it features heavily in section B. And you can see there, for nearly every year for the last 6 years, it's come up twice, if not 3 times, in your section B, and it's also come up twice, if not 3 times, in your section A. So a really important question to be prepared for. Financial maths then we can see came up in 2020, came up in 2017, 2015. So it hasn't featured as heavily on every single year, but again, it is one that comes up kind of every second or third year. It hasn't come up in section B for quite a while, so potentially we could have a section B financial maths question this year. Sequences and series we can see comes up once, if not twice, if not 3 times. So again, this is just to show you the breakdown. I can't really give you any major predictions, because what you can see here is we have a trend that basically every topic is coming up every year. And then finally we've got our proof by induction in the dark blue. You can see it came up on section B last year. We had a section A the year before, section A, etc, etc. So again, just to give you an idea of the types of topics that have come up. If we go on then to look at paper 2, again we can see some common themes emerging here. So again, the first 6 questions we know are section A's, and we can see there that the line and the circle have come up every single year for the last 6 years in our section A. We can see the greeny colour, which is your trigonometry, he really does feature heavily in our section B's. You can see 1 if not 2 main questions on trigonometry, but it also features quite heavily in your section A's. We've got probability and statistics, which again, very important. Section A there, you got in your dark blue, and again in your section B. So again, if I was looking through things, I'd be saying, and it's not really helping you to leave out topics, but your trigonometry, your line in your circle, your stats and your probability would have you covered. You obviously then on paper 2 have your constructions and your proofs. Nothing came up last year in regards to constructions and proofs, so that would certainly be something to be thinking that probably will come up this year. So that's definitely something to prepare for. So again, thanks for watching if you're a higher level student. If you're an ordinary level student, I'm now going to take you through a quick breakdown of your paper 1 and your paper 2. So looking at our ordinary level papers then, we can see question 1 for the last 5 years on paper 1 has been arithmetic, and I would highly recommend you go back through those last 5 or 6 years and do the questions. They are quite predictable. Similar stuff has come up over the years, so I would definitely recommend going and looking at those. Now, doesn't mean that this year it's going to be question 1, not necessarily. What you can notice is complex numbers had a bit of a trend there, and it changed this or last year. So I'm not saying to go in expecting it to be question 1 is arithmetic, or question 2 or 3 is complex numbers, but just to have a look at your questions. You can see algebra comes up as generally 2 questions in your section A's. You can see it there every year, apart from 2016, you had 2 full algebra questions. And then you've got your your area, a bit of trapezoidal rule, etc. coming up. You've got more arithmetic questions, and then in your section B, which again is the latter part of your paper, we can see here we've got a functions and differentiation kind of theme that comes up every single year. Again, would really recommend looking through some of those section B's before your exam. We've got a kind of a trend with your patterns questions that comes up quite a lot in section B's and also comes up as section A. And then you've got your kind of rearranging questions, which also form part of your section B's. So again, just gives you a rough idea of the themes and the trends that we've had over the last number of years. And finally then, for our ordinary level students looking at paper 2, then we can see some common themes again there. So look, you've got your line and your circle, very like higher level students, comes up as a kind of its own question nearly every year. The line can sometimes come up with other things, but the circle, generally speaking, comes up as its own question. Probability and statistics again features heavily on paper 2. So you can see last year it came up 3 times, the year before 4 times, the year before 4 times, the year before that 3 times, and the year before that 3 times. So a really strong question to be preparing for, in my opinion. We've got our trigonometry, again, comes up regularly enough, but between section A and section B. and then you've got your area and volume as well. Again, I suppose another thing to note, like with higher level, you've got your geometry stuff with constructions, etc. You can see that they've come up the last number of years, and again, it's one that you could have your constructions and your kind of angle facts and geometry proofs prepared, and can be quite straightforward then as a question in your exam. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thanks a million for tuning in today, and best of luck to all our math students sitting the Leaving Cert exams, and we will talk to you soon.